level of understanding that they don't give you enough information. And I caught on to that about 11, 12 years ago. Maybe longer than that. I went to Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, I got invited to go speak at a group, right? It was a church. And I actually did a very simple message. But for them, according to them, it was more in depth. It was about the confession of faith. And the pastor afterwards, he's a guy who's been learning, to understand the context of the Bible in Hebrew, whatever. But he was always like watering everything down, assuming the people would not understand because they were what he called the humble people. They were not rich. They were not what he thought highly educated. But people have common sense. And sometimes, it's not being recorded, so sometimes what happens. No, todavía no. We're not on. Oh, we are? Are we live stream already? Oh, okay. You are right. I was wrong. So hold on. Let me turn on my mic here for my own here. Okay, guys. There you go. All right. So when I was in Costa Rica, right, I was able to do a teaching at a church, and afterwards, the pastor he starts talking to me in the back. He goes, well, Rico, he basically was taking issue with the fact that I was giving them a little too much information. Seriously. And I took offense to that. So my answer to him was, I thought about it for a minute, and I said, a true sign of a pastor never determines how much water and how much grass the sheep eat. The pastor leads you to green pastures and to the water, making sure nothing happens to you. They protect you from the wolf. But you don't determine. And I looked at him, I says, you do not determine how much they eat. He never invited me back. But that was a great learning experience for me. Because I from that moment on, I decided I need to give people, it's when you go to a buffet. You can't eat everything. So you pick and choose what you want to eat, chew on it for a while. Because the way that I teach, so get an idea, because today is more like a teaching, the way that I teach, I follow a methodology. Now that I mentioned that, let me share it with you. I follow a methodology the way I teach. So if you tap into my methodology, then you know how I'm thinking. It will be easier for you to process the information. Let me give you an example. Hopefully I have it in English here. Yeah. No, I have it in Spanish. Let me find it, because I think it's important before I get into this, because I'm going to be actually covering a lot of the stuff here using the methodology. So it is important for you to know the thought process. And remember, the way we study today, we don't really have a methodology per se. We just read stuff and we try to accommodate sometimes our theology the way we understand things. And I think that's where the problem lies. We're reading a book that was written to a different people in a different location, with a different culture, with a different language. We're reading the translation. Think about this. We're reading a translation, and we assume that we can understand everything that person was writing to an audience we never met. So you read the book of Galatians. Well, now, when I tell people, and I don't mean to be mean in any way, please, I hope you don't take it that way. That's never my intent. But the reality is, how can we formulate an argument on topics we have no idea what they're talking about? It's not fair to the audience. Do you see it right there on the screen? So what I have there is a methodology. And everything that I teach now, I cover one of those spheres or the educational ladder. As a matter of fact, I have students in Spanish that their homework for every Torah portion, I have 13 students that I give them the opportunity to do a 20-minute video, and they share it amongst all of us. And every single one of those spheres, like for example, when we have here covenant, I went back to college to study this, ancient Near Eastern culture, and righteousness and justice, honor and shame, new creation, chaos and order, sacred space. And actually, I've done this before. I've been to a church where I taught the gospel right from this, the methodology alone. Because outside, you see the letters in red. That represents the realm of death. You see inside the circles, you see its life, order, Eden, and holiness, right? And in the center is God and his temple. So what I teach is that we live in the world that is decayed with death and rebellion. And God is trying to get us into the covenant, into the kingdom, into Eden, through a covenantal relationship. You swear allegiance to God, you come into a relationship of covenant. And then, once you get into covenant, God gives you a gift. He gives you his righteousness. Salvation becomes a gift of righteousness that no one can earn. But then, he gives you honor from shame. From death to life. He changes your name. He changes your status. Baptism becomes the mechanism and the ritual in which you go from one state to the next one. The rite of incorporation, a ritual to incorporate you into the kingdom. It's a legal aspect of it. Baptism is not a religious ritual as everyone thinks. It implies certain purity laws, but when you convert and you go into baptism, it's so that now you're no longer the old creature. Symbolically, there's witness that you made a transition from death to life. It's more for your psychological welfare and well-being. God is letting you know you no longer belong to the realm of death. You've been born again symbolically. You belong to me. And by doing so now, you become a new creation, and now you have order in your life. Not the chaos of death. Now, anyone who follows Torah, you can have order or chaos based on obedience and disobedience. What that did, it removed the fear that God has this whip in his hand and he's waiting for you to mess up so he can just whip you. That's not the character of the God that I serve. He's a righteous God. What he wants is your allegiance. He wants your loyalty. We can all relate with that. How do you feel when somebody has been disloyal and they are completely stab you in the back? That's exactly how God feels every time he does everything for us, and we cannot even obey the most simplest commandments because we want to do it our way. So we are acting like our children because we're the children of God. And we behave like little kids. When you watch a 2-year-old, that's exactly what a 2-year-old person is in Torah. What is the number one word a 2-year-old knows? No. That's exactly what we do when we follow Torah. We want to know everything. We want to know the name, the calendars. We want to know the secrets of the universe. And then we have two options. You get to become a conspiracy theorist, only thinking about the end of the world, but not the right way. There is a proper way to understand the end times. That's what she does. And there's the wrong way to try to scare people out of their minds for every single thing that's going to happen. That's the devil and that's the demons. God is trying to create a people who are secure in their relationship with him. So therefore now we become sacred space. That's what Sabbath is. And that's what the feasts are. And that's what becoming part of the Commonwealth of Israel. We become sacred space. So how do we understand that? Every time I look at a text, then let's go to the ladder. Anytime I look at the text, out of verse. Every time. And I have all these guys and ladies, and they're developing themselves into great teachers. I don't develop anybody. I just facilitate certain resources, and they run with it based on their desire for them to want to do something, okay? We're facilitators, that's it. So the honor always belongs to God. But I tell them, okay, so this is what I do. I have one of my friends and students, he organizes it for me. He does a great job. Thank you, Juan. You're amazing. And he organized the commandments, for example. We're studying the commandments in the Torah portion this year. Only the commandments in the Torah portion. So we divide it up amongst the group. So we tell them, let's just say commandment, any commandment. So you're going to cover that commandment from the archaeological perspective, cultural background, historical, geographical, context of the temple, context of the letter, context of the chapter, from the covenant perspective, from righteousness and justice. Now, when we get together, now we have a Bible study. It's not an argument or a debate. Because now everyone has an opportunity to shine in that area. Next week, whoever covered archaeology will cover the cultural background. And then they keep rotating throughout the year. The whole idea is so that that person is developing different areas of study. Eventually, they'll pick one that they love. And they'll focus on that. But they have a foundation in everything else. Sometimes teachers, I'm sorry? Yeah, I mean, this is my methodology. And this is the way that I've been learning. And this is why, and by the way, thank you for the compliment. I'm very flattered by that. But it's a product of the way I was taught. The way I was taught is this way. So when you hear me, now that you understand the methodology, from now on, from the rest of the teaching, I want you to pay attention some of the areas that I study, that I cover. And in one particular verse, based on the audience, I can say, okay, let me cover a little bit on cultural background, geography, topography, archaeology, the Greek, going to the Hebrew language, going to the temple. Now making connections to make you think outside the box. Because normally we only think according to our belief system. And we do not depart from our own boundaries of what we think we understand. That's why when I went to Asia Minor, everything changed. I told my wife, we need to go back to Turkey and Greece. She goes, but what do you need? You already went. I recorded a whole bunch of videos, and we did. I noticed that when I got back, I missed a whole bunch of other stuff. Because I kept researching and teaching and researching and teaching it. So I go back this year, and I only went back for a few places. I went to all those places, but I wanted to focus on a few things that I missed. And I ended up learning all the stuff. So I tell people, last year going to Asia Minor, I went to Turkey, Greece, and Rome last year. This year we went to Turkey and Greece. We didn't have enough time to go the other places. And it was a blessing last year. This year was a revelation. Everything changes. And the way we were taught, that's why it's important for you to go to Asia Minor, because she teaches on the book of Revelation, and she loves prophecy. So I'm submitting to her, go over there and now see the context. So now you can build it from that foundation. And then you'll see how everything's going to start lining up even more. So now instead of looking for this crazy stuff that we go in end times, that everyone's a prophet and nothing ever happens, now we can start pinning out blueprints and patterns that have been repeated through Scripture. And they're cyclical. They are cyclical just like the methodology. The methodology is a cycle. It's cyclical themes in Scripture. The same thing when you read. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start. I went through I'm looking for something specific. I want to give you an example. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go here to Paul in Athens. Can you read that? Okay, yeah. All right. You can tell all of us here are over 40 years old. Man, after a certain age, everything. Oh, Lord have mercy. You're so good, God, but why? It was so good 30 years ago. What happened? It's a way of humbling us. We get the message. Thank you. Maybe that's why we appreciate eternal life. No, think about it for 1 second. We really don't appreciate eternal life when you're young, when everything's going good, when you have all the energy. We hit a certain age, we go like, there is a God. Where are you? What do I need you? Eternal life. Thank you. I'm in. I mean, it's amazing. All right, so I went to Athens, and what I'm going to do is going to be a little bit formal, informal. What I want to do is provoke you. I really want you to think about, more than just reading what Paul said. Well, the reality is, now that I come to the realization, we don't really understand Paul. We really don't. And I'll tell you why. Because we are living in a culture completely removed of its original context of the Bible. I mean, we are not aware. For example, I went to Athens to make a correction. I wanted to go to Athens because I was teaching about the altar of the unknown gods. Right? Paul talked about that in Athens. Okay? So I was pointing out to an altar of the 12 gods, which is something completely different. So I made a mistake in my teaching. I got to go back and correct it. So we went to Athens just looking for that one thing, and we found it. And then we found that I was given the improper context. But the thing is, thank God, that the archaeologists found an inscription in Pergamum, which is Asia Minor, Turkey. They found an inscription at the temple of Dionysus, of the unknown God, the altar of the unknown God. So I know that archaeology found the evidence that Paul is talking about in Athens. But I was pointing to the wrong thing. In the meantime, there were boundary stones that I read on an archaeological journal. Boundary stones where in the temple you have the soreg. Around the temple building you have a fence. And everyone says, oh, that's an invention of the rabbis. No, that actually comes from Exodus 19, verse 12. It's actually biblical, sacred space. But I found out that in Greco-Roman world, in the agora, which is the marketplace, they also have boundary stones. Certain people cannot go beyond a threshold. It's quite interesting. Okay, and I went to Athens looking for the boundary stones. And I recorded a video on the wrong area, thinking that's where it was. And I had to delete it because then when we walked over Athens, in the area we were going at, we decided to go into the Stoa. When you go to, let me show you a picture. When you go to, right here, I'll find it for you. Be patient with me because, actually, I got pictures here. Give me a second. I got pictures here. See, these are the pictures. I won't show you, baby. I'll only show the other pictures. Huh? Okay, where are we? Hold on. Let me look. Okay, so this is Athens. Let me show the picture here. If you've been studying with me for the past year, you've seen this many times already, but I want to share with you. This is actually the Agora in Athens. Okay, let me highlight for you. Okay, so this is the Bema. The Bema is what Paul spoke from. The number 15. When I enter this area, I enter through here. Okay? So number 21 is actually Panathenaic Way, which is the main entrance to the city. And I'm going to go to Acts 17 to show you how important it is to understand that. Okay? So you see the map and you don't really get it. But when you're there, you go like, wow, now I understand. It's really amazing. So I wanted to know about the Bema. In Corinth, when I went last year, I wanted to go to the Bema because I know the Bible tells us that Paul was taken to the Bema, when he saw Gallio. I did not realize that the Bema was found almost in every city. It was a speaker's platform. It's next to the Agora. They used to make announcements there, and they used to have Stoics, and they used to make Epicureans and philosophers stand up. They start talking. Well, when I went to Philippi, we're doing our own research in Philippi, and after I'm leaving the place, I asked the parking attendant at the time. So I don't see many people here. It doesn't mean that there's a lot. He says, why do they come? The people come? Yeah, churches come, and they come for three things. They come from Lydia. She converted over there. They come for the jail. The archaeologists found the jail Paul was. And it's actually legit because it follows the line of the Bible. And she says, the Bema. And I'm going like, the Bema? I was thinking Corinth. No, the Bema is right over there. And I'm going, and remember, I posed myself a question. I ask myself questions all the time, And I said, well, how can the gospel blossom so fast? I mean, it blew up because of resurrection. We talked about that yesterday. So when the lady takes me to the Bema and she goes, by the way, this is where Paul stood. Boom. And then right behind me, where the Bema was, in the marketplace, speaking to all the people there, remember the boundary stones, they have a marketplace, and then they have the administrative area of the city. So the boundary stones were actually located where the administrative areas will be located, where young people cannot go in, slaves cannot go in, certain people cannot go in. It's quite interesting. So then I realized that behind me at the Bema, and I stood at the Bema, and I'm thinking, okay, so if behind me is called the Via Egnatia. Egnatia is 540-something kilometers, I think. It goes from west to east, all the way to Istanbul. It's the most amazing road. I stood on it. Literally, I stood where Paul walked through. That's where he walked. But I did not know that road went through every major city. Just like the highways in the ancient, Highway 66 went through every major town. Same way. So then I'm thinking, now I understand. So you stand over here at the Bema, right behind me is the main highway. Anything or anyone who's going to go from east to west has to come through there. And then they have a crossroads going now from, south to north. So therefore now, he's in a perfect spot where you can maximize, get the largest amount of people to hear. They're in the market. Everyone's going to listen and go, ah. So this is true everywhere in the Greco-Roman world. Then I began to look at why he went to Corinth for 2 years, why he went to Rome for 3 years, why he went to Ephesus, why he went to Thessalonica, why did he go to Philippi? Because they were all major hubs of people and transportation, logistics. And I'm thinking, this guy had it going on. He didn't waste time in the little bitty places. He went to where all the major traffic, if I were to do that today, I will go to New York City, I will go to Dubai, the big airport. I will last for 1 minute before the Muslims kill me. But I will go to every major hub of traffic, air, no longer walking. You see what I'm saying? It's amazing. So here you have the Acropolis, all the way in the top left, number 1. Do you see that okay? Yes. Okay. Then you have the Areopagus, number 2, right here. That big old stone. Then you have over here all the temple. You see number 13? Number 13 right over here, that is called the Stoa. It was donated by the king of the Macedonians a long time ago to Greece. Well, last year we didn't go in there. I'm looking for the boundary stones all over, but I couldn't find them. Actually, they're in there. But this year we decided to go in because we covered everything else. So I wanted to look for a few things. So as I'm walking up and I'm looking at it's a museum now. From the outside and inside, and I didn't know it was a museum. So I'm thinking, where's the museum? It's right behind me. I didn't know. So as I'm walking through, what's the first thing I see? The boundary stones. And I went like a kid, oh my Lord, this is the boundary stones. I cannot believe I found them. I was like so happy to be there. It's like a kid. Let me show you the boundary. Look at the first thing, this is it. I take a picture next to it, because now you believe me that I was there. Okay? You see the boundary stone, the agora, the inscription reads, I am the boundary stone of the agora. The boundary stones define the public place of the agora. That now tells me that what was going on in the temple is legit, because in the temple they also have boundary stones when you can go and cannot go, except it's a private place or the sacred space of God. You see, now we can validate what the Bible talks about is a legit thing that was done in history throughout different places. Yes, sir. Oh, I'll try it. Okay. It's not too much. Okay. See, there it is. That's a boundary stone. But then, I didn't know. Yes, sir.
So, but it says don't move boundary stone. Is that only residential? Or does it talk about boundary stones for all kinds of stuff?
No, actually, yes, there are different types of boundary stones. In the Bible, you have the boundary stones when Joshua came in as a reminder of the covenant. That's a little different, okay? And the temple, you have the boundary stones, so the soreg, so Gentiles cannot come in. It's only logical. And here, the boundary stones was to delineate certain areas of importance for either administrative stuff. And it's like if you go to the post office, you cannot bring your weapon in there. So that's like imagine, how do you call it? An invisible boundary stone that they have.
The commandment, though, is the commandment only for a residential boundary stone, or does it maybe talk about all kinds of boundaries?
I don't know. I don't follow your question.
Well, it says...
Not to remove the boundary stones? Residential. Right. Residential. Yeah, that's right. Residential. That's the whole point. Yeah, you remind me of the commandment. It's actually, it's important to understand the boundary stones. You cannot move them. It's illegal. Okay? Robert?
Yeah, so God's house, that's a residence.
Right.
God's house, so he'd have boundary stones as well.
Boundary stones. Okay? So you have both of them there. It's only an example, right? And then this is my wife inside on the museum. It's my wife there again. Which one? It will take me too long to answer. It's actually kind of cool. When I'm done, you can read it. It's a very intricate way of voting. It was actually kind of cool. I can't teach it because I haven't learned it well yet, and I don't want to mess it all up and then have to correct it. So, yeah. So these are, you see, this is the whole thing in there. I didn't go in there last year. See, that's the stoa. They remodeled it. Now, this is the speaker's platform. I'm looking, okay, right over there is the road, the main road. You see those columns here? I'm going to show you that a little bit later. But this is the bima. It's called the speaker's platform. That's what Paul stood up to Paul to speak. No, now it's only a little stone, but it's actually a very big area. It was a very big area where they will stand up and they will speak. Now, understand the location. You have the speaker's platform looking to the main road. And there were no trees there at the time, by the way. It was a little bit open. So now you know that they were actually, and by the way, the acoustics are amazing. In Corinth, when I stood, last year I did that. This year, there's no way I would have been able to do it. So I stood up and I taught. My wife was sitting with my daughter-in-law over here to my left when I'm on the bima, and I'm not speaking very loud. They can hear me clearly. Acoustics were amazing, okay? So this is speaker's platform. This is the area, the Roman Agora, the Roman area. This is where I thought the boundary stones were located. Here, I recorded this, okay? So I have to fix that. Now, this is important. I'm going to take you back to Acts 17 immediately after this. Now, I'm standing where the Areopagus was. The Areopagus was like the judicial body for the Athenians. That's where the Supreme Court was, okay? And it's a stone, Mars Hill. You heard of that before, okay? So I'm standing over here like this, and to my right is the Acropolis right there. We were there. And then we're looking down from the, we're looking down. Let's see if I can play it for you. This is the scenery from the Areopagus, looking down. Remember, Paul would have been looking down this way too. That's the place where the boundary stones. That's the area where the bima would have been located. And it's a really high area. Okay? All the temples, if you look down, there were minimum like 8 temples that he would have been looking down. Specifically, and I'm going to stop here in one. Boom, right? Whoops. I got out of there. Let me show you. The boundary stones actually are located in that area right here. Right over here. Right here. The boundary stones. And how I found it actually says the boundary stones, but I would have never found them. You know how I found them? I'm like a little kid when I go there. Every time there was a guide, I'm running after the guide and joining the group and just listening. You do that too? It's the best thing. It's a free tour. It's a free tour, man. It was great. I show up, there's a guide, I just get running to the group, and I'm just like listening. My wife is walking, oh, Lord, I think he goes again. You know? Oh, yeah, she was listening to a Chinese guy talk about Torah stuff. Okay? Anyway, so the lady starts talking, and immediately I get to start listening. I'm like, okay. It's a private tour anyway, I'm just listening. And she says, and by the way, this is the area of the boundary stones. I go, boundary stones? I've been looking all over for this, right here. You know? But I got a free tour. So when if you go to Athens, do me a favor, get a guide. Don't be cheap like me. Okay? Now, but wait a minute. That goes to show you something very important. Yeah, we hired a guide. No, let me tell you, I'll get into the topic here in a minute, but I really want to I want to bring this point home. Okay? Last year, I studied, with one of my students, probably watching, we studied Asia Minor and Greece and Rome. I mean, for months. I watched videos, I read books, I read articles. I saw anything I could get my hands on, right? So we finally get to Ephesus. That was our first stop last year's tour. We get to Ephesus, and we are ready. We have total 6 people together, and we get there. We enter the wrong way into Ephesus, and then I find myself like, I don't know where I'm at. I know I'm in Ephesus, but I've never been there physically. I know things that are there, but I don't know where they're located in the topography. It was a huge lesson. I got a little flustered because I'm thinking I studied all of this and I don't know where to start. So I told my wife and the people with me, hey, let's divide up. You're looking for this, you're looking for this, you're looking for this, and then let me know what it is and I'll go record it. I mean, can you imagine you get there and you're ready, you think you're ready, you know you're ready, you read everything, you studied everything, and you show up and you go like, oops. So I guess some guy that's there from Ephesus, he saw me kind of, I don't know, I was teaching next to a mile marker, a Roman mile marker. He goes, hey, do you need a guide? And immediately within my ego and my soul says, no, because I studied this, I know it. Then I asked him, I said, really, how long you been guiding here? Like 20 years? And I go like, oh, 20 years. How much you charge? 50 euro, hired. 50 euro, you kidding me? That's cheap, nothing. For 2 hours, 50 an hour. I go, wow, he stayed with us for 3 hours. Man, I learned more the first 20 minutes listening to this guy than all the hours I spent on my own learning. Because he is from Turkey. He studied Turkey history, topography, geography. He knows everything I need to know. He speaks the language. He knows what's there. So why would I say no? It was amazing. So we went back this year. We hired him. This time I called for the States. Hey, can I hire you? Sure, come over. We were so impressed by him. He's going to be our guide. He is really good. And he actually added because he was able to tap into the information, and he was blown away that we're so willing to learn. Well, the very unusual tour. We really want to learn details. But anyway, as we go here, so that was a great learning experience for me because it shows you as much as you learn, as much as you think you know, you never know everything. So don't think you're that special. We're not. We're learning. We're growing. This is the reason why I don't have a problem saying I'm wrong and I fix it. It's okay. I'm going to go back next year and I'm going to validate it. And if I'm wrong, it's not going to hurt me one bit because I'm learning. I became better today because I was able to go back to validate something. And that's the one thing I want you to learn about me. I'm just here to learn, like you. I have a different role. My role is to share, but I need to be responsible with what I say. So I'm showing you this now that you have a visual. So imagine if you are actually, this is what Paul would have been standing. As he's talking to the people in the Areopagus, he is down there by the bema. He got taken up to this place. And he's standing right there where you see, and to his right is the Acropolis, an incredible feat of engineering. And then you see all the people go down there worshiping all of the gods within that. And I'm going to tell you which temples were there that he's looking at. Then, when I read the verse to you, you're going to understand that everyone in the system of religion uses that verse to attack the temple of God. When in fact the context has nothing to do with the temple of God. This is Athens. I apologize, I was not more clear. Athens, okay? This is Athens. So let me go back real quickly here to the verse. So you see what I mean. Where is it? Logos. Okay, so now, watch this. When you read about this, it says, so Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus. Now you know where he was, Mars Hill. You can see it? There you go. Now you can, right? There it is. So Paul stood there in the middle of the Areopagus and said, men of Athens, I see you are very religious in every respect. For I was passing through where? Through Athens, in the main road, Panapanaeg Way, right? Now you have a visual. I was passing through and observing carefully your objects of worship. Now, objects of worship. Okay? And it says, I even found an altar on which was inscribed to the unknown God. So I know there is one there. They haven't found it in the archaeology there yet. But they found that in Scripture of an unknown God's altar in Pergamum. So that tells me that they did have it. They just haven't found it. I went to Pergamum this year just to see that inscription. I couldn't find it. Okay? I even went to the museum. They didn't know where it was. Therefore, you worship without knowing it. Therefore, while you worship without knowing it, this is what I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all the things in it, this one, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by hands. He's not talking about the temple in Jerusalem. He's talking about the temples that you see there and the agora, the marketplace, which were what? the temples that were there, I'm going to read them to you here. You had 7 temples, right? How many temples were in the Agora and the Forum? The temple of Athena, the Acropolis, the temple of Hephaestus, the temple of Ares, the temple of Apollo, the Stoa of Zeus, the altar of the 12 gods, and then the sanctuary of Aphrodite. That's the context of what he was saying when he said those things. Does that make sense? So now when you see the same map that I showed you earlier, you see all the buildings, and it's quite impressive. I tell you, it is beautiful. Even today, you see a scenery on a clear day, it's quite impressive. If it's impressive now, imagine back then. So Paul is speaking right here in the Bema. Then he is taken all the way to Mars Hill, where the Acropolis and all the temples are there. So all of a sudden now, when somebody quotes me Acts 17, and they are saying, no, because Paul says, it's like a baseball player. I don't know who play baseball here. Anybody play baseball here? Come on, am I in the United States or what? That's when you know we have a decay of the whole country, when baseball's no longer. Back in the day, play baseball, yeah, even softball, you know. You have a 3-0 count, and you know they have to throw a fastball down the middle. That's exactly what I feel when somebody tries to quote me this out of context now. When they say, well, Paul says that he don't live in temples made of, and I'm going like, well, time out. Do you know where he's talking from? No. Do you know what he's seen? No. Sorry, you don't know what he's saying. It sounds mean, but I don't mean it like that, Robert.
I've always had a question about this. You know, these temples, freedom gods, how did they teach what to worship? Like in monotheism, we have one place where we go and worship and study his word, but there's confusion in this much.
Well, syncretism, I understand that they're looking for the hope that we got. It's all in the sense of the afterlife. So it's like a buffet. Basically, you have a buffet. You don't know where God is. You don't know which God it is. So they create a mythology. And that myth, it actually keeps you alive. And really, what they live on mythology because they needed hope. That's why the Bible so much emphasizes the hope of salvation. Hope of salvation. The hope, the hope, the hope, the hope. Paul emphasized that more than anybody. The hope. Why? The hope is resurrection. They did not have that hope. So the gods became like a buffet. Oh, you don't do it for me? Let me try this one. And then it's based on what you wanted. If you were a woman who didn't like sleeping around, although you live in a culture that was acceptable, then you want to serve the Vesta virgins. You want to be doing something like that. But if you were a woman or a man who want to be promiscuous, then you go Aphrodite. And you can go to some other gods that allowed that to happen. That was called worship. So it appealed to the flesh. So therefore, if you go to Corinth and you go to the temple of Aphrodite and you go over there, you have to really climb up. I mean, it's not like you said, well, I didn't mean to go there. No. That was by design. We climbed that whole thing. I'm telling you, and I told my wife at one point, says, this is really wanting to have sex. Way all the way out there, it's like, no, too much work. I ain't going up there. You know, you know, why on the top of the mountain? Really? You know? I mean, so this is not by accident. If you went to the temple of Aphrodite in Acrocorinth, it's not like you took a detour, you just ended up there. No, that was premeditated to climb up. But climbing up there gives you a sense of that, no, this was not by accident. And don't tell me you're going out there to preach the gospel. You know, I don't think so. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just want to go out there and preach the gospel to the people there. No. So if you went to the Acrocorinth, you went there for one purpose and one only. It was to worship the gods of fertility. Therefore, to them, having the sex was worship. So they didn't feel guilty about it. Oh, yeah, I'll show it. I'm going to be random right now just so that you guys can see. My wife requested for you guys to see this. Acropolis. This is. Okay, so this is, that's the area of the Bema. That's how big it was. It was big. You know what's really interesting? Last year, I stood there. I was in awe for like 45 minutes. I'm thinking, wow, Paul was teaching here. It's not about Paul. I could care less, it's not idolatry. It's nothing to do with that. It's just the fact that I'm in the place where all of this took place. And immediately as I'm looking over and I knew the map, I'm visualizing in my mind what would it look like. So I was sitting there thinking, okay, that's the main road. And what people could he have been talking to? Hundreds of people from different countries, so maximizing, and they all spoke either Latin and they spoke Greek. So Paul was a Roman citizen. He had to speak Latin and Greek. He spoke Aramaic and Hebrew. The guy was multilingual, so therefore he can reach the largest amount of people. He was an expert in Greek rhetoric. Therefore, he would speak with the Epicureans and speak with the philosophers at a high level of understanding, applying Torah principles. In other words, he is actually engaging with them in a way that they would have understood. Okay, then I'm thinking, wow, I'm blown away by all the geography and topography. I'm understanding Acts 17 better now. And immediately there is a group from they go there from the ships. They go in and they spend the day, right? And one of the groups is a Christian group, an American group. And the guide, I'm standing there and I deliberately wanted to watch what they will do. As they're coming through, nice. The guy says, and by the way, right here is what Paul taught in the book of Acts. And the people went like, wow. No interest whatsoever. And I'm going like, I spent 45 minutes just standing there. Trying to figure out, teaching about it, thinking about it, formulating everything, now that I've been to the Acropolis, the whole chapter 17 came alive. So therefore, when I talk to people and they want to quote this, I'm going like, sorry, it's just out of context. Well, I have a little bit of a problem. When you go to a place, when you see it, when you learn it, when you study it, and no one's ever seen it, or someone hasn't seen it before, they assume that you're trying to overrule them or trying to know more than them. It's not has nothing to do with that. It's just that I happen to have the privilege to be there. I'm not the only person. Many people go to Greece, and there are hundreds of people walking around it, but not many people go there just to study it. They go there to take pictures. Just like Israel. They go to Israel. How much did you guys learn on my tours when you go to Israel? You learn a lot. But you can talk to all the people when they go to Israel, and I always ask them questions. Hey, where'd you go? What did you do? And they go to the traditional places. They got pictures, but if they show you a picture, they cannot tell you anything about it. To me, with all due respect, I'm glad they had a great time eating the food and stuff, but they missed a great opportunity to learn more about the Bible. You know? All right, so let me continue. So this is the place. Let me move forward because I want to take you to Corinth. From here, we went to Corinth. After I'm done, I'll let you read this, Robert, so you can see it, okay? All right, so this is still Athens. That's the Acropolis there from the main road. Okay? Now this right here was quite interesting because this is a container for offerings to the dead. So this is a place where they had offerings to the dead. They threw them in there. Quite interesting. So you know that the worship was to the underworld gods. That's what they were fearful of. That's why Paul's message was about resurrection, about life. What a contrast. Now, you see this right here is a container for offerings to the dead, the 5th century BC. Now, this is right here, the altar of the 12 gods, which I was teaching, it was the altar of the unknown God. I was wrong in that, so I have to rectify that. Okay? Now, I got the information. This is what the altar looked like. Okay, can you see it okay? It says, the altar stood in the center of the rectangular sacred enclosure with a paved floor and stone superstructure, low vertical slate. Let me move on. It says, it was built under Pisistratos, grandson of the namesake of the famous tyrant. It was dedicated probably to the 12 gods of Olympus. Okay, so now we know. By the way, when you went in there, you have to pass by this place as you enter the city. So obviously when Paul was going through the city, he is watching all of that stuff. He sees all of that. So we never really think about that. Now, let me show you something really cool here. As we're going into... the guy froze up on me. Are you enjoying this okay? It's a little bit different, but I want to show you pictures of where we went. And then when I get into the text here in a minute, it's going to make more sense. Sometimes we read the book of Acts and we give it a spiritual application to what we think it says. We miss a lot. You miss a lot when you do that. You miss a lot of information that allows you to learn about the context. I know. It's just my computer got messed up. So let me take you to Corinth here. I'm going to take you to Corinth in a minute. Yeah, right here. Okay, I'm going to take you to Corinth. Here. Let me know when you see it. Okay, make it bigger. Now, this is actually the evidence of the synagogue in Corinth. I asked. So, this is still Athens. I'm sorry, Athens. The Athenian. This is the boundary stone. This is the area of the boundary stone. If you can see it, okay? You're still in Athens. See, that's the place that I found. I know where it is now. Okay? I did a little teaching there. Got a little excited. And this is the altar of Zeus there in Athens. This is the Acropolis. Now, that's the Acrocorinth right there. You know, actually this year, it would have been impossible for us to actually record up there. I mean, it was supernatural. God is amazing. If we would have gone this year to do all of this research, there's no way we could have recorded anything. We found out that you have to have a special permit, and it's a lot of money to record everywhere in Greece. No idea. Last year, there was hardly anybody anywhere we went. And we didn't know, so we recorded little videos everywhere. This year, it would have been impossible. And there, last year, that was completely clear. We went all the way to the top, and I got pictures of the Ixus, the whole neck in Corinth where they have the canal. I'll show you that in a minute. It's amazing. We would not have been able to do any of it this year. Yeah, the cloud is actually covering the mountain where the temple of Aphrodite would have been. Okay, that's the place where they used to go up in the Acrocorinth to do all the sexual stuff. Okay, now this is the area. There's two parts of in Corinth that the archaeological. You have the main city and then you have the Roman area. Okay, I have two sides. Okay, and normally last year we went to the other side only. You know who Erastus is in the Bible? Have you ever heard of Erastus? Well, he's the Adelaide. It's called the Adelaide in Greek. It's actually the treasurer of the city. He was a benefactor for Paul. Well, he's mentioned 3 times in the New Testament, right? I think Timothy in Romans and I think in the book of Acts. He's mentioned 3 times. What's interesting is I knew through archaeology they found an inscription because he donated. He was a benefactor of the city. He had money. He was very rich. And the reason why this is important for us to know is because now we know why Paul was funded. He had people with status who, instead of becoming a client of that person, he became a benefactor of Paul. Let me explain. In the first century, you have what is called patron-client relationships. In the beginning of Paul's ministry, you see that Paul is not accepting money from anybody. Did you notice that? He works. Have you ever wondered why? Which many people misunderstand that by saying, well, people in ministry should not get donations or whatever. No. In the culture, if I go somewhere and you serve the god of Apollo or any of the gods of Greece, and you are someone of status, and if you give me money, you're giving me grace. And if I accept the money, I'm accepting you as my patron. Thus, I need to be loyal not only to you, but to your God. Paul understood this. So he will not accept any money from anybody who was not Jewish. Not because he's trying to say I'm better than you. It's just that he understood that reciprocity was a core situation in the Greco-Roman world. If someone did something good for you, you were expected to be reciprocal without questions asked. By the way that it worked was, if I am the patron of the city, and then you need things, you need money, you need a job, you need whatever recommendation, then you will come to my house every morning. You sit outside my door, right? And then when the slaves would open the door, then I have an audience with you. Then if you needed something, I could give you a recommendation, I could give you money, I could give you a piece of land, manumission, whatever it was, but now you are bound to me as my client. And I'm the patron. Now you have to vote for me. You have to tell others to vote for me in the government. And then not only that, but if you see me walking down the street, you are now to proclaim my goodness and how good and give me praise in the public arena because I am your patron. Well, that's not supposed to be with God. We're supposed to give him praise because he's the ultimate patron. He has given us a benefactor. His name is Yeshua. Yeshua is doing the role of a mediator. I'm the benefactor. It is through Messiah that we have gained the greatest gift, which is salvation. He is the one making the way. So Paul became now Paul is the messenger of God through Yeshua the Messiah. And then when Erastus believes in the gospel, now he is so grateful. Now he becomes a benefactor. Not a client of Paul, because they're both clients of God. And Yeshua becomes the benefactor, the mediator of that exchange, the whole thing. Does that make sense? So therefore now, Erastus now, because now they're brothers in ministry, and now they have reciprocity because they both receive the same gift. Now Erastus is reciprocal, giving Paul what he needs in order for him to continue the work, which is what? The resources, because now Paul doesn't owe him allegiance as his patron. Now they're benefactors and both give honor to God. That's the way the kingdom is supposed to work. By the way, we all did it yesterday. I spent all the time teaching you, sharing with you, and some of you were very nice giving a donation. I didn't have to ask you. My job is to share the best context of the Bible in a way that would help you grow, and I'll dedicate time with you with your questions. Why? This is my job. I'm grateful to be a great servant of the great King, and through Yeshua now I have a way to come into his kingdom, and I want to give you my best. Now, the reciprocity goes both ways. This should not be told. But we don't understand it. We don't live in that culture. And sadly, because today's world in religious circles has been manipulating the people to give you money. I don't need to manipulate you. So now, Erastus there, I was looking for it. So I go into Corinth, and I'm trying to look again for this inscription. I cannot find it anywhere. So it occurred to me, remember the guide in Ephesus? Well, I went into an office, and there's a lady sitting there, and I went to ask the person who works there, excuse me, do you know what the inscription of Erastus is? She immediately, oh yeah, it's right over there. Not very good instructions anyway, because we were walking around, we didn't know where it was. So we're looking, and we're going around looking for the inscription, and where is this thing? And then we decided to ask the parking attendant. Literally, she is inside the little thing. She's actually taking care of the parking. So I figure, hey, she's here. She lives here. I go ask her. Oh, yeah, just go down there. It's right over there. Even the parking attendant knows what this stuff is. And we talk about it. We don't even know what it is. Because they live there. They understand the culture. So I saw the inscription. This is the inscription of Erastus. Literally, I got to see it for myself. I took a picture with it too. See? It's amazing because now we know that he was a real person and he was known in the city because he donated a sidewalk leading towards the theater. So everyone would have known his name. Now think about this for 1 minute. Rico, why is this so important? Because now we know that the gospel was reaching not only the slave caste, but also now the elite, the plebeians, or the patricians, the higher level status within the Roman, Greco-Roman world. Meaning that now everyone hears Erastus, a benefactor of the city, someone who donated a sidewalk with the inscription right there. He is helping a Jew. He is a follower of a Jewish Messiah, another Roman emperor. See, to us that means nothing, but to them, that would have been his life at stake. And he was very famous. He traveled everywhere with Paul. He was actually in charge of a congregation for a while. So this guy was highly intelligent. He was an Adelaide. Look at that word. Adelaide. I can't pronounce. I'll get you the grammar a little bit later, the letters. But it's a treasurer of the city. The text says the treasurer of the city. And that was a very high level position that you see there. So this is what the inscription is like. Many people, and by the way, so again, I see a tour in Corinth. I'll go by and listening. And on one of them, I pretended, like, hey, by the way, have you had a chance to take them to the inscription of Erastus? And the lady, like, look at me, tú estabas caminando the other way. Oh, you heard. And the lady goes, well, oh yeah, you know about that. Oh, yeah. It'd be kind of nice if they get to see it. That's like a biblical. If time allows. People don't know, so they miss really what's important there is the evidence that the gospel is real. The people in the gospel's narrative is real. That whatever the Bible mentions Erastus, here's the evidence. So this is not some story of some guy that we never met that may be real or not. We have the evidence behind it. And then I went back to the place. By the way, this is the bema where they took Paul in Corinth. Gallio, by the way, Gallio was from Spain. So they took him to the bema. Last year, I stood on top of the bema, and you see the tree right here with that lady standing? A little bit more over here in the corner, there's a tree. My wife and my daughter-in-law were sitting there, and they could hear clearly for what I was saying. And by the way, the bema was, again, in the middle of the main roads going in and out of the city. There's no way I would have been able to done anything this year. I was blessed. Thinking back, it was a great blessing last year. It's actually on YouTube. You can go to wisdomandtorah.com and look for the playlist for the cultural background. So when we got back, I saw the bema again. I'm walking back, and I went back and I asked the lady who told me about the inscription. Hey, by the way, did you have any evidence of where the synagogue was located here in Corinth? And she pointed me out to the archaeology in the museum. There it is. This is the inscription of the synagogue of the Jews. And here's the column with the menorah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the synagogue Paul went to. There's the evidence. And by the way, what's really peculiar is that everywhere we went to, and I'm not trying to open a can of worms here, but just so you know, everywhere we went to in archaeology, in Sardis, we went to Ephesus, we went to Athens, Rome, and also Corinth. All the Jews, and Thessalonica, all the Jews and the evidence of the synagogues were distinct by the menorah. It's quite interesting. Okay, I like the Magen David. That's not a problem with that. But what I'm just saying, the archaeology, if you're looking for the Magen David to identify Israel as a nation in that time frame, the evidence of the Magen David, you find it in the synagogue of Capernaum in Jerusalem, in the northern of Israel. You find evidence of that there. But in the diaspora, they knew the Jews by the menorah. Just so you know. Okay, because people will say, well, there's no evidence of the Magen David anywhere in the Greco-Roman world. Well, maybe, but there was the evidence of the Jews with the menorah. So you cannot say the Jews were not there. You follow? So if you know the symbols, then you can trace them. So this was really cool because in the Museum of Corinth, they have the evidence of the Jewish population. So therefore, we know that there was a synagogue, same synagogue Paul went to for 18 months. Quite interesting. Yes, sir.
You use the word bema. I've only heard it in Hebrew, going to the bema.
Right. That's the same thing.
They use the same word?
Yeah. Bema is a Greek word, actually. It means a speaker's platform.
Okay, so it's not a Hebrew word.
That I know of, no. Yeah, the bema. I have to validate that. Okay? So is this making sense? So you see, this is the evidence that we have here, and this is really cool. This is the museum. I took a picture as I went along. I couldn't do any teaching there this year. So in the temple of Asclepius in Corinth, right, what they will do, when Paul talks about healing, he has a contrast to talk healing that God provides versus the healing of the Greco-Roman world. So Asclepion was the god of healing, and that's the god that has a snake. The medical sign comes from that. By the way, Rome was actually founded on that. Okay, I'll tell you the story in a minute. So what you see there is actually a cast of the body parts affected by any kind of sickness. And then you can also see, I don't mean to be graphic here, but it is what it is. You have genitalia, ear, you have breast, and you can tell that this lady had breast cancer. Okay, by the way that it looked. So what they would do was they thought that if they get sick, either get a headache, an earache, or a leg problem, or gonorrhea, or syphilis, any of that stuff because of the sex going on, get it? They get sick, they will go to the temple of Asclepion. Now, this is really important. Asclepion, they call him Soter Asclepion. Soter means savior. They believe that they will be saved by the God of healing. That the God of healing will actually bring them salvation. Why? Because they're going to be saved from death. Get it? Okay, so what they will do, they will set up hospitals. But it was like a hotel, actually. And if you were sick, you got there, you went there, and the way they did it was you get to stay in a room, and they had all this frigidarium, they had like a cold plunges, they had the hot bath, they had the saunas, and they had all this stuff going on. And the whole premise was you go there, and they have a priest, they have sacrifices, you worship them, and you're hoping that your stay there, God will give you a vision to heal you. Never anything happened anyway. But they had one in the Acropolis. They had one everywhere. In Pergamum, they had one everywhere, even Rome. So actually, in Ephesus, they call it Asclepion Soter, the Savior. And it's interesting that Paul is making a contrast between the Savior, God bringing salvation, and bringing the healing of death. And now that makes sense, because if you talk to somebody who believes in Asclepion, now you're telling him the contrast between the God of healing of the Greco-Roman world versus the God that brings true healing of the Bible. Does that make sense? So what you were talking about, Robert, and they have the whole buffet of gods, Paul is drawing, contrasting. You serve this God, let me tell you how my God is better than yours, than yours, than yours, than yours, than yours. It was easy, because Paul's message was only one. Resurrection. You get sick, you die. You know, if you go on a ship, you may be afraid to have a shipwreck, and you die. You go to war, you die. I mean, you're born, you die. Even being born and not getting adopted in the first century caused death. Meaning this. If in the Roman world, if a man, the pater familia was the head of the family. You have pater patria, the father of the country. Pater familia, the father of the family. Okay? And now the father of the family had complete authority over everyone, all the children, the patrimony, the children. And when you have a baby born in your family, it was up to the father to determine whether or not he would adopt you or not. So this is what they will do. So let's say you have a daughter of my son. My son has a daughter or a son. Okay? What they will do when the baby is born, they will place him at the feet of the father, pater familia. If the pater familia turns his back on it, that baby goes out to the dogs. It's dead. They leave him out. He doesn't want it. They give him no name. And all of a sudden send them out. And they either are raised by some of the family as slaves, or the dogs eat them, or they go into prostitution. That's the way that it was. But if the father picks them up, names them, and waves them, that is a sign of adoption. Now they have a party. Now I want you to go read the whole gospel in contrast to how we have been adopted into the kingdom of God. It's going to make perfect sense. Because they don't want them. They didn't want them. We got to remember, especially women, they rather have the men than the women. Okay? I mean, women, like, at that time was more responsibility. Because the women were responsible to protect the purity of the family, and the men the honor of the family, as in the Middle East. So many of the women either went into slavery or prostitution, which was legal in the time of the first century. They even paid taxes and everything. Okay? So it was a very different world. Abortion, the Romans were experts in abortion. They knew how to get everything done perfectly with abortion. It was a despicable, more or less like today. It's exactly the same thing, okay? So is this making sense? All right, great. So I want to just show you this. Oh, by the way, you know that figure of, this is actually, okay, this right here is actually the Roman period, Hermes and the ram bearer. When you see a picture of Jesus with a sheep, it's a reference to Hermes, to this right here, to one of the pagan gods of the Greco-Roman world. We have inherited a lot of stuff that is mixed. We don't really know, and you know this is part of the process of learning. Okay, guys, this is the bema. And this is Acrocorinth, looking from the bema towards the Acrocorinth. So when we go back, let's go back to the text real quick. Hopefully this is not boring for you guys. All right, so now let's read it again in regards to Athens. And it says, now you understand. As I passed through observing carefully the objects of worship, I even found an altar in which was inscribed to the unknown God. Therefore, what you worship without knowing it, this I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and all the things in it. This one, being Lord of heaven and the earth, does not live in temples made by hands, nor is he served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives to everyone life, see, and breath. Notice that the main premise of his whole argument was that he gives life and breath to everything. One does that. That's alluding to creation. He says, he made from one man every nation of humanity to live in all the face of the earth, determining their fixed times and fixed boundaries of their habitation. In other words, he's saying Poseidon does not put dominion of the sea. And Hades does not have dominion of the underworld. In other words, he's saying it's only one God. And he gave function to creation. He did not have gods run the creation. I mean, that's a very significant message for people back in that time. And sometimes we don't get it. It says, to search for God, if perhaps indeed you may feel around for him and to find him. And indeed, he is not far away from each of us. For in him we live and move and exist. And even some of your own poets have said, and now he's quoting their own people. He knew Greek rhetoric. Now, I want you to notice what's going to happen when he starts quoting their own people, their responses. He says, your own poets have said, for we also are his offspring. Therefore, we are offsprings of God. We are not to think the divine being is like gold or silver or stones, an image formed like by human skill and thought. Therefore, although God has overlooked the times of ignorance, he now commands all people everywhere to repent. That's the gospel from idolatry. He is teaching what Acts 15 says. Acts 15 is saying not to commit idolatry. He is teaching against idolatry. He is teaching them Torah. He says, because he has set a day in which he is going to judge the world in righteousness by the man who he has appointed, having provided proof to everyone by raising him from the dead. Ooh, now pay attention. Because when he says that, remember, that is the big issue in the first century. How do we gain salvation? In other words, how do we gain life from death? That's the biggest problem. Salvation, really, what it is from death. And it says, now when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, listen to how they reacted. Some scoffed, but others says, we will hear you about this also. So Paul went out from the midst of them, but some joined him and believed. They believed when he talked about resurrection. That is the core essence of it. They didn't respond when he's talking about the gods and who created it, because they believed all the gods created something. So being the atheist in the first century was something uncommon. They believe an atheist, somebody who says the gods did not exist, that was an affront. He will be dead. They consider that to be the highest level of ignorance. Not idolatry. Because now think about logically from their point of view. Say, you mean to tell me there's no one who created all this? Our question is not that someone created it. Say, who? Was it this God, that God, that God? Hey, the Egyptians have a God. Maybe that creator one. They're looking for something. Paul narrowed it down. What Paul did, he narrowed everything to the one true God, the God of Israel. How do we get it done? Through his son Yeshua and the resurrection. Resurrection? We need to hear more. We don't know about that. How many of you have studied the concept of resurrection in the Greco-Roman world? That's the problem we have. That even people within the believers, we never really look into this. I almost never taught that in the church. No, you got to believe by faith, 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 faith. Faith is active. Faith is something that can be explained. Seriously, my faith is based on my conduct and my everyday life based on what I believe. You see me the way I treat my wife, the way I live my life, you know my faith. It's not something that you cannot substantiate. Now watch. So Paul went out from the midst of them, but some of them joined him and believed, among whom were also Dionysus, the Areopagite. This guy was a judicial guy. He was actually one of the guys up there on Mars Hill. And a woman named Damaris and others with them. Now he goes to Corinth. Right? Now he goes to Corinth and he sees the people. After these things, he departed from Athens and he went to Corinth. He went southwest. About maybe 3 days walk. It's about 2 hours in a car. Remember, a day's walk is like 20 miles if you walk fast. Okay? After these things, he departed from Athens, and he went to Corinth, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus. Pontus is actually in Asia Minor. Pontus is a district. It's actually a province of Turkey. You got Cappadocia, Ponta, Bithynia, and Asia. These are provinces in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. It's not a city. It's a province. How many of you did not know that? I didn't until about 2 years ago. And I study all the time. Never thought about it, you know. So it says, he found a Jew named Aquila, a native born of Pontus, who had arrived recently from Italy, along with Priscilla, his wife, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to depart from Rome. Wait a minute. Who was Claudius? When did he expel the Jews from Rome? And why was the reason he expelled them from Rome? If you understand that, then you will understand the letter to the Romans and why it was written. I don't think you caught on to what I just said. Okay, so who was Claudius? We read this for years. We never make the time to know what's going on. So let me give you a little history on this. It says, Claudius ruled during the time of the greatest missionary expansion of the early church, and so played a significant role in experience of the first evangelists, in this case, Paul. Luke records that he expelled all the Jews from Rome, and that Aquila and Priscilla were caught up in the melee. Acts 18:2, right? It says, Suetonius, which is a very important historian, explains that the cause of the expulsion from Rome was that the Jews were constantly rioting because of Christus. The message of the gospel was the reason why they were actually rioting in Israel at the instigation of Christ. That's what the historian says. Says, since the early emperors probably viewed the Jews and Christians as members of the same religion, and that's the one thing we need to know. In the first century, a believer in Yeshua was exactly like a Jew. The difference was they believed Yeshua was the Messiah. They met together, they ate together, they kept the Sabbath together, they kept the feast together. Well, Rico, there's no evidence anywhere that they kept the Sabbath. Then you're not understanding Greco-Roman culture. Let me tell you why. Have you ever heard of what is called trade guilds? Or I keep forgetting the word in English, man. A union. The union. You see, you have a union today, right? And you belong to the union. Let me ask you a question. How many of you belong to a union now? You do, right? For what type of work? Perfect. Does your union require you to pay homage? Yes, dues. To a God? To worship that religion? To worship the God? To bring sacrifices? So therefore, it's okay if you follow Messiah and you pay your dues. But in the first century, if you belong to a union, you have to, every union had a patron god. And every patron god requires sacrifice and worship. And the feast they celebrated to honor that god. And they have to pay their dues as offerings. And the reason why you pay dues, it stems from ancient Greco-Roman customs of giving the money, which in turn was actually sacrifices to the god of the union. How many of you did not know that? Now, this is important because the whole Greco-Roman world functioned in associations and guild, trade guilds. So basically, scholars have come to the conclusion that if you are either a Greek or a Jew, or you are anybody who live in Ephesus, for example, you have the union of the silversmith. They were making idols for Artemis, right? So if you worship Artemis, if you belong to the silversmith union, you were loyal and you swore allegiance to Artemis and the city. Now you know why they rose up to fight against Paul. Because he's taking their money away and because he's enticing them. By the way, one thing that many people don't know is if the people begin to raise up against the government and against the unions, then the Roman Empire will completely get rid of them because it's too much trouble. And Ephesus was a very important city. It was a neokoros. Neokoros means a keeper of the temple, a temple warden. We're going to read that next in chapter 19. It's important. So therefore, scholars have come to the conclusion that if you lived in Ephesus, in Athens, in Corinth, anywhere in the Greco-Roman world, if you did not belong to an organization or a union, then you cannot have or survive in your community. Because your job depended on it, your loyalty to the city depended on it. And by the way, the Jews were the only entity, the only people who were not forced to be part of the trade guilds of the pagan gods. Why? For some reason that God gave favor to the Jewish people through the change of the either emperors, Julius Caesar and then later on Augustus, even from the time of the Greeks, as a matter of fact, that they gave exemptions to the Jews in everywhere they lived. Exemptions, meaning they were not, they were exempt from the Roman army because they have to fight. And they could not supply kosher food, and they could not allow them to take Shabbat and the feast off in the war, right? Next, they have exemption from paying the Judaicus tax, the tax, the Jewish tax. The Romans allow the Jews to give that tax instead to the Rome, to give it to the temple in the half shekel. So they were able to send the half shekel to Jerusalem every year. It's a great gift, by the way. It's an amazing thing, okay? By the way, that's how they were counted in the community. So the morning offering and the afternoon offering in the temple is actually a representation of the whole community at large, everywhere in the world, if they send the half shekel. So someone living in Rome and Greece and all that stuff, when Yom Kippur came, if you live in Rome, you were covered because you paid the half shekel, which counted you in the community. So now when they do Yom Kippur, when you're praying in Rome, it's as if you're there in Israel. Is that making sense? Is it me or is it warm in here? Okay. All right, it's me. Am I hot, baby? I'm asking my wife. What was I saying? All right, so. Anyway, so the Jews were exempt from what? From being part of any of the associations. They had their own collegia. Collegia means meeting place. They had their own association. They were Jews. So therefore, if you believe in Yeshua, now you cannot commit idolatry. Because Acts 15 says, abstain from what? Adultery, idolatry, unclean foods. Guess what? You cannot live in a pagan society now. Because you have to swear allegiance to the city, you have to swear allegiance to your guilt, and to be part of your job, now you have to render offerings to this God that is against the Torah. So what the Gentile will do, they will go as converts or as God-fearers into the synagogue and be part of their organization, of their union. Not full members, but eventually they could become full members. And once they identified with the Jews, then they were no longer having to do the thing with associations. The problem is that when the believers in Yeshua come in, they're creating a problem. Because the message is anti-imperial message. Please go to Romans chapter 10, verse 9, please. Is this making sense? All right, so now Claudius was the emperor when he throws out the Jews because of the issue with Messiah, right? So when you go to Romans, can somebody read it for me? Romans 10:9. What does it say? You should know it by heart.
Confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Okay, so it's talking about salvation. Now, let me show you something that, man, I get a lot of pushback from people. And when I talked to a Greek guy who I met in Portugal, it's incredible. He understood the definition. He never read it before. And he knew what I meant. It says that if you confess with your mouth that Yeshua is Lord, the word there is kyrios. The word kyrios was actually it's actually an anti-imperial statement that Paul is making. He was actually getting political. Now, when you go look into it, it says ideological confrontation, the proclamation of Yeshua, Messiah, and Kyrios. The central emphasis of Paul's missionary preaching was the proclamation of Yeshua as the Messiah, a Messiah of the Jewish people, and the Kyrios of the world. Please understand, the word Kyrios is actually, or Kurios, but it's actually Kyrios in Greek. It's actually the term given to the emperor as the Lord of the empire. It was an anti-imperial message. Now, I went to Pergamum, and I'm going to show you the picture in a minute. I went to Pergamum for one purpose and one only. Actually, let me show it to you before I continue. I went to Pergamum, which is important for you to know, because in Pergamum, you have what is... Pergamum was the first place we went to. Yeah, no, here. There we go. Can you see it okay? Okay, so this is the temple of Trajan in Pergamum, one of the 7 churches. Okay, now, this is an imperial temple. Imperial cult was practiced in Ephesus, in almost every city. Now, there was a title, and I'm going to show you that next when we get to Acts 19. But it's a title that was a very coveted title. It's called Neokoros. Neokoros was actually achieved by Ephesus in Turkey. It was actually the highest honor a city can have. And the way for them to get it was they needed to build a temple to the emperor. And they have to do worship to the emperor. And they have the image of the emperor and worship the image of the emperor. And they have to have an allegiance to the emperor and the whole city. So if you went in there preaching against that Yeshua now is your Kyrios, you must confess that your Kyrios, your Lord, is Yeshua, a Jewish Messiah, and not the emperor. That was an affront to the power of the emperor in a Roman city, and it could get you in big trouble. That's why he got beat up. He went to jail. He eventually killed. He was preaching against the kingdom of the emperor. I'm presenting Yeshua. Watch. This is the image of Trajan in the what do you call it? The army, the regalia. What do you call it? As a general. Okay, and this is there in Pergamum, and this right here is the inscription. And I went to Pergamum last year, and I went back this year to take more pictures. I went there just for that inscription, because when I began to teach about Yeshua in the context of Romans chapter 10, I got a lot of flack from people who never really looked at it, never studied it, but they have an argument about something instead of listening first. And they thought that I'm minimizing Messiah when I'm trying to give a context to what Paul is saying. So I went to Pergamum just to prove a point that I got a book that cost me $120 with all the evidence that in the Septuagint, in the time of the Septuagint, the word Kyrios in the Bible is always applied to God, obviously, because he is the master of the world. No one denies that. But 200 years before Yeshua was born, 200 years during the time of the Hellenization and the Greco-Roman world and the world, the title Kyrios in the Greek world became a title of defining who the emperor was. In the Bible, we know that the Lord, the God of Israel, he's our Kyrios. He's the Lord. He is the master. And he has placed his son to be the Lord on the earth, just like he placed David to be the Lord over Israel. Get it? That's not minimizing Yeshua in any way. But when Paul is saying this, he is actually making a contrast. He is saying that is not the one who has power over life and death. That's why Romans 10:9 is structured the way that it is. That if you confess covenantal language, if you confess with your mouth that Yeshua is Kyrios, not the emperor, and you believe God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. In other words, it's not the God of the emperor who saves you. It's the God of Israel through Yeshua, the one who he has appointed to rule the world now. Because that inscription says that Trajan was the Lord of the heavens and the sea and land, That he was the Lord, the Kyrios. So 200 years before Yeshua was born, that title Kyrios was also a meaningful title for the emperor. As sole authority, as the Pater Patria, the father of the whole country, who has sole authority over life and death. He has sole authority over everyone in the kingdom. And that's why Yeshua is always saying, Father, who are in heaven, hallowed be your name. And the word that it uses in those terms is pater in the Greek, in the language. Ava in Hebrew, but pater if you translate from the Greek to the Latin. It's a very legal language he's using. Is this making sense? So this right here is the inscription right there. That's the inscription that I went all the way in the cold weather out there. It's 1,000 feet above sea level, by the way, that city. It's incredible. It's freezing. Just to make sure I take a picture next to that thing. Meaning that I wanted you to know that Paul lived in the real world using a real language, that if you understand the language, the gospel message would explode with real meaning and understanding. It's not the gospel message that you accept Jesus, now you're going to go to hell and burn forever. That's not the message that I see in Scripture. That is completely removed from the reality of what I see in the Bible. That's right. When the Bible says even the stones, even the stones will speak. Literally they do. Is that making sense here, guys? So this is the top of Pergamum. It's on the mountain. So let me go back to the Bible if not, I never finish. So as you can see, when we look into the scripture of the Bible, it makes more sense. So let me go here. Jews demand signs and Greeks desire wisdom. But we proclaim Messiah crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. Why was that foolishness to Gentiles? I mean, no one would have ever been caught wearing a cross as a sign of honor in the first century. No way. That was actually the biggest shameful thing you can ever go through. The death of crucifixion was actually the worst type of death anyone can have. A Roman citizen cannot be crucified. It cannot be crucified. Roman citizens have to be decapitated. That was the honorable way of dying to them. Because if you crucified a Roman citizen, you are mocking the emperor that he had no power over life and death. So imagine if you're Greek and you're walking, the psychology, and you're walking in the Greco-Roman world and you say, hey, by the way, I serve a Jewish Messiah, a Jewish anointed, Christos. But we have one. It's called the emperor. And by the way, so tell me about this Jewish Messiah. Oh, yeah, he died on the cross. Oh, okay. Walk away. You mean to tell me that he is going to be honorable when he died, the worst type of shameful death? Oh, but he resurrected. Excuse me? So he resurrected. Tell me about it. So the Romans crucified him. The emperor gave the word. Because when they gave the word, it's as if the emperor was actually doing it. Right? So, wait a minute. The emperor gave the word and he died the worst type of death. And there's evidence that he resurrected. Oh, yeah. How do I know more? That means that the emperor has no power over life and death. Who is the God? Oh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Wait. You mean the God of the barbarians, the God of the Jews who no one likes? Yeah. Now, mind you, please understand the culture. If you're a woman in the Greco-Roman world, this will make sense. Okay, so I don't mean to be graphic for your children, but this is important they learn, okay? They believe that men who were not circumcised were moral. And men that were circumcised were immoral because of the exposure of the gland. That's why when you go to all the Greco-Roman museums and you see all of the great, statues, it's out of proportion. They present the genitalia uncircumcised and small, and that's done on purpose because to them that was a sign of morality. That's interesting. But the exposed gland, to them, it was immorality. Now, if you're a woman who was taught that circumcised people were actually, barbarians, and they were immoral, and that's why you wonder that all the women started going to the synagogues. You notice that the explosion of the gospel began with women first, and I always wondered why until I began to look at the culture. It's only make logical sense. So check this out. A Roman man can have sex with another woman or another man, according to Roman law. If the woman is a prostitute or a slave woman or a stranger or a foreigner, have sex is okay. If she was a married Roman wife and a citizen, that's a problem. He can have sex with another man if, depending on the passive or the receiving, the whatever. So if he was the passive, he was shameful. He was considered gay. But if he was not the passive, then he's not gay. So he can have sex with another man. Now you're married to this dude, and because he's a Roman man, and he have all these customs and all these things they practice, that was not considered adultery or homosexuality. And by the way, you're only good for having children. That's it. Because the Romans believed and the Greeks believed that the love of a man is greater than the love of a woman. I'm sorry, I love the love of that woman right there. You know, I don't know what Alexander the Great was thinking about and any of those guys, but no. But they believed that the love of another man was greater than the love of a woman. Well, that's what they believe. Now, you are a woman in the Greco-Roman world. And they taught you since you were a little girl, you know the Jewish guys, those are immoral barbarians. And then you grow up thinking that way, and then you get married. And your good Roman man, he's sleeping around with other women and other men. And then the barbarians over there, they go to synagogue, they're good fathers, they're faithful to their wives, and it's not lining up. It's interesting that the circumcision becomes a sign of the covenant of morality for Israel. And it was a sign of barbarism to the nations. And that actually became an example of why we want to serve the God of Israel. And that's why women gravitated towards, the Jewish people in the synagogues. Because they were being treated with more equity and more righteousness. Isn't that interesting? Is that making sense? All right, perfect. So it says, Jews demand signs and Greeks desire wisdom. We proclaim Messiah crucified, stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Messiah, the power of God and wisdom of God. You see, it's all redirected back to the Father. So Claudius was actually the emperor when all this occurred, and they were in Corinth. And now you can place a location where all these things are happening, and now it makes sense. Let me go to Acts 19 real quick. Acts 19. And I'm going to go here when we get to Erastus. You see Erastus right here? In Acts 19, they are in... Where are they? They are in Ephesus. Major riot in Ephesus. When these things were completed, Paul resolved in spirit to go to Jerusalem, passing through Macedonia and Achaia, saying, after I have been there, it is necessary for me to see Rome also. So after sending two of those who were assisting him, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia, which is actually northern Greece right now, by the way, he himself stayed some time in Asia, meaning in the west side of Turkey. Now, there happened to, at that time, no little disturbance concerning the way. That's the original name of the believers, the way. What was the issue with the way? They were proclaiming another king. They were saying Yeshua is Kyrios. Now, what you need to remember is that in every city that was under the Roman control, they will swear a decrees of Caesar. They will swear allegiance to Caesar. They had an oath of loyalty to the emperor. So if someone comes in preaching against the emperor, saying Yeshua is Kyrios, that is an affront to the oath that they took in the community, and they needed to defend that. If they did not, and it got back to Rome, that someone is preaching another Lord, it will be considered treason and sedition. That's why Paul got thrown out of Thessalonica. Because they thought he was teaching against the decrees of Rome. I'm giving you all that, am I? But did you realize there was so much like this within the first? And this is why I'm so fascinated by the Word of God. I mean, I'm in awe of the Lord. Because when to us we were taught, it's just information. Stories about Paul and an itinerary of his travels, but there's a lot more that we're missing. That's why as long as I can go back to Asia Minor, I'm going to be learning a lot every year. My life has changed completely. The whole New Testament lines up perfectly with the Torah. And the letters of Paul perfectly in the context of the Greco-Roman world and the customs and what was going on. Unfortunately, not many people spending time doing it. And I wish they did. For someone named Demetrius, a silversmith who made silver replicas of the temple of Artemis, they still make it to this day, was bringing no little business to his craftsmen, to his union. See, now he's thinking money. Okay, the issue is the bottom line. Remember, that's the way they make money. Now, what's interesting is during the time of Domitian, the emperor of Domitian, the time of the Revelation. And then later on Trajan. This is what happened. After the destruction of the temple, make a little sidebar to this. After the destruction of the temple, everything changed. The temple was still standing when this was written. After the destruction of the temple, everything changed. Okay, you have to consider the whole thing in the whole world changed after the destruction for the Jews of the temple. It occurred for the Jews. So now you have 30 years from the year 70 all the way to the year 100. 30 years, complete utter chaos. The Jews no longer have the exemptions. Now the Roman government was actually pressing the Jews everywhere. They will lose the exemptions. Now they don't have to pay the half shekel to Jerusalem anymore. Now they have to pay it to the temple of Apollo. The tax Judaicus is the Jewish tax. They have to give that money now to a temple. By the way, now they don't have the assistance of having collegia. They can't really meet anymore as often as they used to in their synagogues. Now, guess what? If you're a believer in Yeshua, you're in trouble. Because the Jews don't want you. Because now they're losing their privileges because of Messiah. So they become the synagogue of Satan. The context is not the Jews are bad. The context is that the Jews in those places, they are losing their privileges and they're losing their way of making a living. And because of the message of Yeshua, they become the adversaries of the Messiah. And they're basically turning them in because they don't want to lose their benefits. I'm not saying it's right. But the way that everyone is using about the synagogue of Satan today in the world is completely out of context. Completely out of context. When I found this out of my research on the book of Revelation, I'm thinking, oh my Lord, we need to repent of slandering the Jewish people for all the stuff we've done. That's not what I meant. I'm not saying that it's still right. They still became the adversaries of the people. But because of they trying to survive. So therefore now you have the mission. And you have Nero, then you have the mission of different emperors. And now guess what? They cannot buy or sell anymore. Because if you are a Jewish person and you're having all these issues, and then you don't have the synagogue and you don't have the right of collegia, how do you survive? If you're a believer in Yeshua and the only place that you can do things was within the Jewish community, now they don't want you anymore, and you cannot worship the God of the pagans, now you cannot buy or sell. No one wants anything to do with you because you don't belong to any organization. Now it makes sense. And by the way, on top of that, you were forced to honor the emperor. You were forced to actually bring sacrifices to the emperor and to honor the image of the emperor, which the book of Revelation is the image of the beast, which is the statue that I showed you. By the way, in the year 225 of the Common Era, the Romans went back to what is called the Libellus. Libellus was a little document that they started making the Romans actually use, travel with them, that when they asked them for the loyalty to Rome, because Christianity was exploding to the point that they wanted to restore the ancient Roman way, so they came up with the Libellus, and they actually forced people to give a witness if they were still faithful to the emperor. So they have to show a little piece of paper in which somebody was a witness that they actually offer sacrifices to the emperor, and they have to walk around with it. It's like if you have a passport, show me your papers. Exactly the same way. If you didn't have that piece of paper, you can either die, lose inheritance, lose property, or be thrown out because you show no loyalty to the empire. So the whole message in the first century was an anti-imperial message. So the beast was the emperor. The image of the beast was the statue in the temples that the people were being forced to worship. That's a fact. And that's not saying me speculating. This is a fact. You can find this anywhere in all the... is this making sense? Now, what's interesting is that you have cyclical. These are cycles. Well, I could say that a type of Antiochus was a type of this. Antiochus Epiphanes. He would have been a type of this type of stuff. And then every emperor who wants to be worshipped, Nebuchadnezzar, and the pharaohs, Hitler, He went a 1,000-year reign, and he put the sign of the against the Jews on the left hand instead of the right, and they cannot buy or sell. I mean, the same thing. They put them in ghettos. Oh my Lord, the same thing repeating over and over and over and over. So I know prophetically, instead of looking at a particular person, we're looking for signs of a cyclical behavior, and then you see it repeating itself, and then you know where you're at. Absolutely. Right. That's, by the way, that's imperial worship. The Catholic Church, imperial worship. No Jew in their right mind will follow Jesus hanging on a tree. There's no way. If you have a Jew look at Yeshua or Jesus on a tree, that is against the Torah. Yeshua sits at the right hand of the Father, not hanging on a tree. That's a shameful thing. We have it backwards. The Roman Catholic Church today is imperial cult. They bury their popes underneath the thing. It's actually has to do with the dead. People don't want to accept that. I've been to Rome. I saw the whole thing. I'm going, oh my Lord. They took all the gods of the Greco-Roman world. Now they call them saints. Yeah. It's crazy. It says, verse 25, these he gathered together, and the workers occupied in such things, and said, men, you know that from this business we get our prosperity. And you see, by the way, that stadium can sit 24,000 people. I had a chance to teach from there. If you go to the videos, you can see it. And you see in here, not only in Ephesus, but almost all of Asia, this man, Paul, has persuaded and turned away a large crowd by saying that the gods made by hands are not gods. So the issue here is idolatry. So don't tell me Paul is not teaching Torah. He is actually going against the number one thing in the commandments, idolatry. So not only is this a danger, this line of business, it's about the money line. It's all about money. Of ours will come into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be regarded as nothing, and she is about to be brought down even from her grandeur. She whom the whole Asia and the entire world worship, Diana. You know that movie Diana? It's about a goddess. Yeah. Okay, it's actually Artemis. I got to tell you, though, the image of Artemis is impressive. I went to the museum. There's two of them. And when you walk in and you see it, you go like, wow. The way it's completely marble. I have the pictures. I'll show it to you later. It's amazing. I mean, these people went way out of the way to worship something that cannot do anything for you. As a work of art, incredible. But I look at it and I'm going like, why would they worship that? But they did. Okay? Now watch. When they heard this and became full of rage, they began to shout, saying, great is Artemis of Ephesians. And the city was filled with tumult, and with one purpose they rushed into the theater, seizing Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were traveling companions with Paul. But when Paul wanted to enter the popular assembly, the disciples would not let him. And even some of the Asiarchs who were with his friends sent word to him, saying, we urge him not to risk himself going into the theater. Very important why, by the way. So this is the theater. They use it today for music. They're remodeling now. We could not get in this time around. So last year I was able to teach from there. And it's truly a great honor, I'm telling you. I'm blown away for the opportunity. Some were shouting one thing and some other. Now, I want you to come to this verse here. Verse 35. And when the city secretary, the Adelaide, had quieted the crowd, he said, Ephesian men, for who is there among men who does not know the Ephesian city is honorary temple keeper of the great Artemis and her image falling from heaven. Now, it's important that you understand this term. It's extremely important that you understand this term. It's called, this is the temple of Artemis, one of the ancient wonders of the world. This actually was from the museum in Ephesus. Neocortes. This is a very important title. Neocortes was is the highest level of honor you can give a city. You gain the favor of the emperor. Okay? And they were fighting for that title. In the first 200 years of the Greco-Roman world, Pergamum and Ephesus were the first ones to receive it. You have to do all kinds of crazy stuff in order to get it, by the way. Okay? Neokoros was, by the way, when you go into the Greek here, the temple keeper, what word do you think you see? Temple keeper.
Neokoros.
It's actually in the Greek in your text. The title that we want to learn, it says temple keeper. It's actually the Greek word that when you go to an inscription in actually in Ephesus, I can show you the inscription where it says Ephesus Neokoros. It's actually in your Bible. It's in the Greek text, in the book of Acts. But we never thought about it. But when you go and look at it, let me tell you what that means. Neokoros, thank you so much. Gracias. Neokoros was an honor conferred upon a city whereupon the city was permitted to construct a temple to the emperor. Highest level of honor. So if they would have allowed Paul to continue to preach the gospel, saying that actually Yeshua is the Kyrios, that would have raised a lot of offense to Rome. And Rome would have taken away the title, would have taken away the privilege, and actually would have destroyed the city. Okay? And it says the city became the guardian of the imperial temple. And cities throughout the Mediterranean world competed for this honor. Okay? So it says temple keeper, Neokoros. That's the Strong's 3753. Neokoros is derived from Neos, the Attic form of Naos, temple, and Koreo, the to sweep, temple sweeper. It came to mean temple keeper, then became a title designating cities in Asia Minor which have built a temple in honor of their patron god. That's the whole idea. So the emperor was considered a god. Okay? In Acts 19:35, the title is ascribed to Ephesus, where a temple was built in honor of the goddess Artemis. How many of you have never heard about Neokoros? First time? And this is actually in your Bibles. Any questions so far about the topic? I don't know how much more time I got. Time flies when you're trying to teach something good. How much more time do you? It's 12:20. Are you guys bored? Are you guys? Can I? I'm fine. I can be here all day long. I'm going to be resting. I'm going to be resting on the plane. Give me, yeah.
So in the worship of Diana, did they involve meteorite worship like the Muslims do, or is that, am I in error about that?
I about it, but I'm not completely 100% sure. But that's something that it was actually mentioned somewhere when I was out there, but I haven't looked into it yet. So I don't really have a clear answer for you. But I do know that that's actually part of it involved. It says her image falling from heaven. So it's quite interesting. So I got to look more into it because I'm not quite sure right now about that. Let me go to chapter 17. I'm scattered right now because I'm trying to show you a few things. I can go as long as you want. My flight don't leave until 5. Oh, I'll be done pretty soon instead. Yeah, because if we eat, then they won't come back. Hey, I know how it functions. You ain't fooling me no more. No, I'll get offended. Let me go to chapter 17 real quick. Talk about Thessalonica. Paul goes and he follows, you see all those little notes? These are all my commentaries from sources in Spanish and English. You got everything. I mean, I think like, for example, let me give you an example of what I mean. I'm going to kind of break it down for you so you get an idea how I study. We were talking about earlier, okay? So let me read the first 2 verses and then I'm going to tell you how I process. Okay? Now, after they traveled through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica where there was a synagogue of Jews. Okay. So right off the get-go, on that 2 verses, I'm thinking, now they traveled through. Well, how did they travel? How long did they travel? Which area did they travel? How long did it take them to go from Amphipolis to Apollonia? Where's Apollonia? Where's Amphipolis? Well, I've been to both. But Amphipolis is there in the archaeological site. But Apollonia is not really the archaeological site. It's a new name. It's called Kabbalah now, which just means new city. Neapolis in the Bible. And Apollonia is nearby. Okay? So it says, and they were to a synagogue of the Jews. Oh, interesting. So let's talk about they travel through. Let's talk about the Via Egnatia. Okay, so let me break this down for you. So I'm going to take the opportunity to take the next 15 minutes, 20 minutes to break this thing down the way I study so you get an idea how I process stuff. So now you notice I connected a whole bunch of things. Whole bunch of stuff. Whatever I said about trade guilds, it applies in Rome, in Greece, in Turkey, and also in first century Judea. Okay, it worked the same way because they were influenced by the Greco-Roman world. Remember that. So watch. This is actually the street that leads from modern-day Neapolis or Kabbalah to Philippi. Now, this road goes from Istanbul all the way to the end of modern-day Macedonia. Okay, now, this is the pastors of the congregation that I go to. And that road was actually still in use until the late 1920s. Early 1920s. Early 1900s. So this road was built by the Romans. It's the most important road in northern Greece. You control that road, you control the empire. Okay, this is actually in Philippi. Remember I told you about Philippi, this was last year. This is Philippi, and I was looking for this road. I couldn't find this road. So we went to Philippi. When we went to Philippi, we asked I was asking a lady, a parking attendant, another one, where was the Via Egnatia? And she goes, oh, it's right there. It's actually the main road. There it is. We rode the same road from Thessalonica all the way to Philippi. The main highway is actually next to the ancient road. But I was looking for that road above, and that's when I realized, wait a minute, the main roads went through all the cities. Now I know why Paul went to certain places. Because they have the highest level of traffic. That making sense? Logistics. It's perfect. Okay, what he did. Now, how do they build it? This is a huge feat of engineering, by the way. I mean, these roads can still there. Some of those roads you can still walk them. Okay? This is how they did this. Now, they have the Via Appia in Rome. I didn't get a chance to go see it. They have the Via Egnatia in Greece. They're all connected, by the way. All roads lead to Rome. That is true. That was actually very true. When we went to Portugal, we were on the train, and I saw actually a road, an ancient road, and I'm thinking, could that be an ancient Roman road? So I went on the internet. Sure enough, they had a particular road that went all the way to Spain along the coast. It's incredible. And the aqueducts that we saw were amazing too. So the Egnathian Way, I can never pronounce that word, a major road stretching approximately 450 miles, 725 kilometers from the Adriatic coast of the Balkan Peninsula in the west to the Hellespont of Byzantium, Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul in the east. And the reference is actually in Acts 16, verse 11 and 12. So putting to sea from Troas, we sail straight course to Samothrace, and on the following day, Neapolis, which is modern-day Kabbalah. Okay, we actually stay there. And from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia, a Roman colony. So Paul went to a Roman colony, meaning that he spoke Latin. Because Roman colonies, they spoke Latin. Okay, and it says this. Acts 16 records Paul's arrival in Philippi after sailing from Troas in Asia Minor to the Macedonian port of Neapolis, modern-day Kabbalah. He and his companions traveled overland approximately 10 miles, 16 kilometers. It's not that far. Today's highway is actually alongside the ancient Egnathian Way. We got off the highway, we went down, we saw the road right there. It's incredible. Still the same thing. The Via Egnatia crossed the ridge that separated the Neapolis port from Philippi within the ancient Philippian walls, 20 foot wide. Egnathian Way constituted the Decumanus Maximus, linking the eastern and western gates of Philippi and forming the Philippian Forum northern boundary. In other words, it is extremely an important historical road. But you know you have rest areas and the highways? That comes from the Roman period. They used to have like little inns. They had silversmith because of horses. So every 20 miles, they had an inn for human people who were walking. Every, I think, 80 miles, they have for horses. And people can stay overnight. If you were the elite, they had special accommodations, like 5-star accommodations. If you were the poor, it's like motel hotels, get it? Same thing. Nothing has changed. Now, you may be thinking, Rico, why is this important in our study of the Bible? Because Paul utilized all of these sea and highways and walkways all the way to preach the gospel. So literally, we have the opportunity to trace all the itinerary and follow the footsteps of Paul all through Thessalonica, Amphipolis. We went to Kabbalah, we went to Philippi, we went to Athens, we went to Corinth, we went to Rome. And we were able to go to all these places. By the way, I know more or less the synagogue Paul went to in Rome. We went to the Roman Museum, the Jewish Museum. And they asked us that during the flood, there was a great flood. And I said, well, wait a minute. So is the synagogue has been here the whole time? He goes, no. This synagogue was built here after the flood in the early 1900s. It used to be on the other side of the Tiber River, where the ghetto was. Okay. So, oh, by the way, there was a synagogue. We think that's an ancient synagogue. Can you tell me what that is? Sure enough, they gave us the address. We went there. We actually went to the front of an ancient synagogue that today is a restaurant. Okay? And more than likely, they think Paul used to go to that synagogue in Rome because he was there for 2 years before he died. On the other side of the Tiber, exactly what it says. By the way, we crossed the bridge that connects the Roman Agora, the marketplace, with the Jewish community on the other side of the river. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful, huh? Okay, you convinced me. Whatever my wife says goes. Okay, hold on. I need to find the picture first. Because that was last year. So give me a second, guys. I really appreciate your patience, and thank you for allowing me to go in different directions. But I'm trying to give you an overview on how much information there is in the New Testament for you to get excited about this. I'm telling you, it will change your life when you start looking into the stuff. You get all excited about it. This is last year's, hold on. Can you see? Let me put it there. Okay, remember the ostentatious hairdos Paul was always talking about? Yes? He's talking about women and their hairdos? There it is. Trendsetters. There's the women with the ostentatious hairdos. And people in some churches thinking that you look pretty and stuff, and women cannot wear makeup and stuff. That's not what he meant. He's talking about the new Roman wife who was very like a feminist, and they were speaking out of term. Is that you? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, this is last year. Where's the synagogue? Oh, that was the last part of the trip. Hold on. Did you send me the video? Man, you made me go all the way down to the bottom again. No van a enviarte. Envíalo no. Sorry, guys. Got it? Accept. Downloads. I don't know. It what? Oh, it's preparing? No, you don't. Okay. Let me go here. I got to go all the way to these. This year or last year? Huh? Okay. I've been to all these places that, look at this beautiful thing. Isn't that gorgeous? That's my little girl. Anyway, back to this. I can't find it now, Jolie. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this is Corinth. Acropolis. No me envíes nada. Don't send me anything because then I'll mess me all up. Okay. This is Rome here. No, this is Athens. Oh, here we go. This is the Jewish synagogue in Rome. The new one. Spectacular. Well, it's not about 100 years, but it's new. Because they had a flood, so that's the Jewish synagogue in Rome. It is the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. It's beautiful. Terrible acoustics, though, but it's beautiful. See the seats with their names and everything like the regular synagogue? The ceiling is amazing. You can tell the building because it's the only roof that is not completely round. It has like a little square at the top. So you can identify it from a distance. Look at that. Look at that. Where they keep the Torah scrolls. I mean, the art is amazing. That's a lot of money in Rome. Okay, look at that. Now, I think if I keep going through here, I'm going to show you. It's beautiful. If you can get to go to Rome and go to the Jewish synagogue. And by the way, even the taxi drivers tells you, if you want the best food, go to the Jewish section. The food is incredible. Kosher, they have the whole kosher area, but the food is amazing. Now, by the way, just because some food is kosher doesn't mean it's good. Please know that. It's good to be kosher, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. But the food there is amazing. And these are all the museum and all the scrolls. That's for the Brit Milah right there. It's incredible. I mean, what you learn. And the Jews in Rome, they came there 200 years before Yeshua because of the Pompeii. When they conquer Israel, they destroyed the temple. You know, during the time of Pompeii. And they stayed. They were slaves, and then they became citizens, and then they went back. So there was a huge Jewish population. Now, I asked them about the old synagogue and the other side of the river. So now we're walking towards there. Okay, that's the restaurant we ate. I took my wife for my anniversary in Rome. We spent our anniversary last year in Rome. It was kind of cool. This year we had it in Sesme, Turkey. Okay, it's kind of nice. And this is the Jewish area there. And we're walking towards, there we go. That's the Tiber River. Let me give you a little history about this. Tiber River. Now, when I'm crossing the river, which is the main river of Rome, the reason why Rome was established was what happened on that particular river. Now, you notice this is a bridge, 2 bridges. Go from the side of the Agora. We're actually going from the museum all to the Jewish community where they were on the other side. That's a piece of land in the middle of the river. They have buildings there. They have a hospital there. And I'm thinking, hospital? And then when I saw the island, I'm thinking, that looks odd. It looks weird. It looked like a ship. The way that it was designed. So I came home. I didn't even think of anything about it. By the time I got to Rome, I was so tired that I just could not really function straight. But I have questions. We need to go back to Rome to actually do it right this time. Okay? So this is the bridge that was built over 200 years before Yeshua. Still there, the same bridge. Okay? Now, please understand that Paul walked there. He had to walk through there to get to the community that he lived and when he would go to the Agora to preach, right? That building, you see the river, you see down the bottom over here? It has a big area that is open. You have the rivers. It's actually like a piece of land in the middle of the river. So this is the myth. The Romans actually went to Greece and they wanted to establish Rome, but they didn't know where to establish it. So they went to Greece and they brought the snake from Asclepion. Okay? And they brought the snake came back from Greece, and they went all the way to the river Tiber from the sea. And the river, actually, when they got to that place, there's a sandbar in the middle of the river. The snake jumped off and got on the sandbar. And the river, supposedly the ship got stuck there. So they said, this is the place. And they actually built everything around that place. And they built a hospital of Sklepion. That's the oldest hospital. Today it's a regular hospital. And back then it was actually a hospital of Sklepion. It was a temple to the god of healing. So Paul, every time he would go down to the Agora, he had to go by the hospital of Sklepion. See, you think about Paul, but you never put him in a real place with real location, real geography as a real person. It's so disconnected with what we know. You see, this is the other side. You see that? It looked weird. It was designed as a ship, by the way. So go back and look on YouTube. Tiber, the river Tiber, on the hospital. And now this is Vicolo del Aleta. And this is the ancient synagogue. This is the ancient synagogue in the ghetto where the Jews used to live. And they believe that this quite possibly would have been the synagogue that Paul went to on that side of the river. So now it's a real thing with a real story with real people. Make sense? They have the best dessert there anyway. So. Any more questions? I think I'll leave it here, taking a lot of time. And I covered as much as I could for the information that I had. I mean, I have more information I can share with you, but I'm trying to just give you a taste of the importance of New Testament understanding. Let me go to the YouTube page real quick. I want to go to my YouTube, and I want to show you the Wisdom and Torah. And you can go to my playlist. Playlist right here. And these are all the videos. These are all the videos that you can see basically. I'm sorry. These are all of the videos that you can follow the trip. From last year. Yeah, we're going to add the other ones. Did you see it? Okay, so you see, I'm going to Paul, Chaos, and Ephesus. Language status and Ephesus.
Stop researching with ChatGPT.
I will.
Its information is not reliable.
We are standing next to an inscription as our guy was talking to us. He actually made mention as he was walking by about the inscription that has two different languages. It's like a Greek, type of Greek, and also the Latin on top. And the reason why I wanted to highlight it is because culturally, in the Greco-Roman world, citizens had to speak Latin, Roman citizens. Did you know there were more Jewish people in the Roman Empire than actual citizens, Roman citizens? Something to look into. Besides that, this lets me know that Ephesus was an imperial city in which they had Roman citizens because they had to speak Latin. Now, he just highlighted for me, thank you, Volkan. He just highlighted for us a very important word, neokoros. Come on up.
Latin?
Latin. Neokoros. In Latin, and in Greek. Now, that's an important word because that set up this city as a temple guardian. Now that establishes a foundation for what happened to Paul and why the whole city came against him. Because once it's a temple keeper, that means that their whole allegiance is to the Roman Empire and the emperor. So here we have the evidence on a simple inscription. But if you understand the culture, this tells you a lot more than just some Latin letters and Greek letters. It tells you their status. It tells you their allegiance to, and it gives you an idea of the level of citizens that also lived here at that time. So this is an example of the videos that I do, and I hope that you will consider looking into them and watch them. And I went through like Acts, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So you can follow the itinerary. It's actually backwards, so the videos, because I started in Ephesus. So you can start in chapter 19 and work your way back to chapter 16. Yes?
Is that playlist titled The New Testament Culture and Asia Minor?
Yes. Yeah. It's like 20 videos there. And
Where are they?
huh?
Where are they?
Yeah, let me go, let me show you,
I went to playlist,
okay?
like, maybe there's more.
Let me show you here real quick. Keeps changing this stuff on me. Okay, what do you see on the screen? Oh, okay, good. So look, go to my Wisdom and Torah, if you can subscribe and hit a like, that will really help tremendously. So look, follow the screen, hit playlist, and then you have different ones here. Go New Testament culture, Asia Minor, or Rico in Ephesus here. But if I play them all, when I went to Corinth. Oh, that's a different series that I just did. I'm sorry. Go to this one, Rico in Ephesus, but it's actually the whole Bible culture, Asia Minor, and Greece. Then the other series, I went to a congregation, and they asked me to do the whole series, so I did like 5 teachings going through each chapter. You know, so this one is on site, the other one is basically someplace else. And I also have this one. My son did a great job on this one. He did all the editing and the videos. We're walking up in Ephesus, one of the very important streets. Underneath, you have a whole sewer system, drainage system, businesses on each side. But if you notice the pillars all the way up, down and up the street, on them, they had images. Let me break this down for you. You see those pillars right there? As you can see it very well, because of the internet. They used to put the image of a benefactor. Like, for example, as I'm moving up, you're going to notice that there's an image of a guy who's a doctor. This gentleman right here. He was actually Alexander. He was actually a doctor who was helping the city with malaria. And then he actually died of malaria himself. So because of all the things he did in the medical field there in the city, they built a column with his name on it, on a white column. And they put his image as a way of thanking him, as remembering him as a benefactor of the city. Now, by the way, you know you are benefactors in the kingdom of God. And those were not designed to be worshipped. It was a way to say, okay, wow, this guy did something for this city to make it better. We're supposed to be benefactor pillars of our communities. That's what it means. The pillars of your community means to become a benefactor. And this year we went back to Ephesus because there's a remnant of a pillar that had the name of people in it. A white pillar of marble that have the name. In the book of Revelation talks about that. I will write your name on a pillar. It actually benefactors who improve the way and the better the community. That's the message. You are supposed to improve the kingdom of God. To become pillars of the community. But you understand it when you go back over there, you see that. So this little video is what it does. It gives you a glimpse of the culture of the first century. It doesn't answer all your questions, but at least it would allow you to get an idea. So thank you guys for having me.
I was just observing, you were showing that last little portion there, that just how things were laid out. That's literally, I mean, the Roman Empire had its handprints, its fingerprints on everything in the world, as you know, since so many things that you have today. But that's what our medicine.
Absolutely.
I've known that, but
Yeah.
there
It helps a lot. You should have seen the rich houses in Ephesus.
It really makes everything come alive, like in scriptures. Because I was always wondering, like, why did Paul? Was he just on dirt road, or like, how did he know where he was going? And he just wanted going.
That's a really good, because people don't realize how advanced the Greco-Roman world was. And that I got pictures here real quick. The last pictures, these pictures here, when we were in Ephesus. These pictures, it blew me away. So last year we didn't cover this. I know, I'm trying to share here in a minute. last year, these are pictures of the elites living in Ephesus. The houses were like 5,000 square feet. I mean, they had everything. It's amazing to me. And this is called the Peristyle Courtyards. They found in the area, not the, what do you call it? Not the administrative area, but the lower area. They found everything. They have water. They have bathrooms inside their houses. They have warm water. They have plumbing and everything, yeah. This is one of the houses. Now, you see the floor? That's for the bath. They used to have the bath, for the heating room. And they had everything. You see right there on the wall, this right here? You see this in Masada. They had all the, what is called frigidarium, which is a cold room. They had the hot bath. This was the hot bath. The steam comes from there. That's the guy, Balkan, the guy from. And this is one of the rooms to have dinner and stuff, to have symposium. It is impressive what they did that. This is one house. A lot of money. There were actually mansions. Look at this. And that's what they uncovered back in 1970 something. The archaeology is incredible. The detail and all that stuff there. Yes, sir? You would really appreciate everything. You'll be blown away by the stones and everything. So they have money because of the walls. And look at that. Look at the detail. They found that on the ground because it was all on the ground. It was preserved. And that's the view of the city looking down towards the main strip. And this is the menorah we found. This is the Library of Celsius. And then on the bottom, in one step, when they were rebuilding it, they found the menorah. Somebody's, menorah, 7 branch in here of the Jewish synagogue nearby. And this is you see all the way back here? These were all those houses were located. And they believe all those homes went up all the way halfway up the mountain. It's all on the ground now. But this was the greatest slave trade in Asia Minor, was actually this agora. So, all the pictures. And this is the road to the artificial harbor where Paul will come in. So anyway, guys, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Miriam. And I hope you guys were enjoying it and giving you more of an insight of the New Testament. Please consider joining my website, wisdomandtorah.com. I have all those teachings there. And I travel to all these places so that I'm able to give you the best possible information that I think you deserve. Because if not, we're always going to be trying to figure out what is right, what is not right. And I know I give you a lot of information, and sometimes people say, why do I need to hear all this stuff? Did you learn something new today? And I just met you for the first time. My whole purpose is to motivate you, to say, wow, I believe all this stuff for years by faith. Now I can literally see that it's real. So again, it just so happened, I'm trying to work on a tour next year to these places in March. Jump in. If not, we can go to Israel. I'd rather go to Israel before any other place. So if you want to go to Israel, we take tours to Israel too. Maybe you guys can organize one here and I'll go with you. Okay? All right. Robert? For what? Oh, it has to be 2 weeks. There's no way we can do that in one. Thank you guys. Shalom to all of you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for joining me today.
Okay, folks, lunchtime.